I was folding towels on the couch, humming under my breath to the rhythm of my own quiet thoughts. The living room was still, the kind of stillness that only comes when the house is truly empty, when no one's expected, and silence isn't waiting to be broken. The late afternoon sun crept through the windows in long orange bars, landing softly on the wood floors, making even the dust look golden. I had a cup of chamomile tea, cooling beside me on a coaster that still bore the ring of yesterday's coffee. It was one of those rare moments of peace you don't realize you're in until something shatters it. My phone buzzed on the side table. I didn't rush to check it. At 64, I've trained myself to finish whatever I'm doing first. Folding towels, brewing tea, balancing on the step stool to dust the ceiling fan. No task was ever so urgent that it couldn't wait 30 seconds. But something about this buzz, short, firm, and solitary, pulled me toward it. I picked up the phone, expecting maybe a package delivery update or a message from my neighbor Karen about the garden club meeting. Instead, I saw her name flash on the screen. Sierra, my son Ryan's fiancée. The one with the million-watt smile and Pinterest-perfect life. The one who never quite looked me in the eye, who always seemed to hover on the edge of performance. I didn't open it right away. My thumb hovered over the message like it might burn. Then I tapped. Hey Lydia, we need to talk. The photographer has a specific vision, and the aesthetic is really important to me. I hope you understand, but it's probably best if you don't attend the ceremony. It's nothing personal, but the venue's very minimal, very modern beach. And your look might not really fit. Hope you're not offended. That was it. No love you. No thank you for everything. No we'll miss you. Just a brittle text dropped like a bomb into my afternoon. I reread it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand. I did. I just couldn't believe anyone would actually write something like that and press send. I let out a sound, something between a laugh and a gasp. I sat there, clutching the phone, blinking like I could blink the words away, but they stayed, burned onto the screen. I looked at the towels in my lap, soft, warm, still smelling faintly of lavender dryer sheets, and for a moment I felt like I had fallen out of my own life, like I was watching someone else's humiliation unfold. I could have replied right then, could have typed something snarky or wounded, could have sent a thumbs up or just the word wow, but instead I did what any mother would do. I called my son. Ryan answered on the second ring, cheerful. Hey Mom, what's up? I didn't bother with small talk. I just got a message from Sierra, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The line went quiet. I could feel the change in his tone before he even spoke. Oh, yeah. She mentioned she might reach out. She's uninviting me to your wedding. She's not uninviting you, he said quickly. But even he sounded like he didn't believe it. The venue is really curated. It's all minimalist and clean lines. And I'm not minimalist, I said flatly. It's her big day, Mom, he said, gently. She wants everything to be perfect. I paused, then asked the question I already knew the answer to. So you agree with her? Another pause. This one longer. I told her you'd understand. I pressed my fingers to my temple. Did you even try to defend me? He didn't answer. I let the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating. Then I inhaled slowly and said, well, I understand. And in that moment, I did. I understood that something irreversible had shifted, that the boy I had raised, nursed through fevers, driven to practice, celebrated through every heartbreak and every B-, had picked someone else's vision over my presence. I can still help with the cake delivery, I heard myself say, and I'll double-check with the florist tomorrow, just like we planned. Really? He asked, a little relieved. Of course, I said, smiling through my teeth. Whatever helps make your day special. But something in me broke, as I said it. Not a crack, not a fracture, a clean snap, like a bone that had been stressed for too long, and finally gave in. I felt it down to the base of my spine. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rant or pace or call my sister like I normally would. I just cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, wiped out every cabinet, polished the stainless steel fixtures until they gleamed. I moved like a ghost in a house I had paid off alone, in a kitchen I had remodeled myself. I cleaned like I could wipe away what had just happened. Like if I kept scrubbing long enough, it might undo the damage. The next morning, I opened my calendar to cross-check the dates for the bakery delivery. And that's when I saw it, a little post-it note Sierra had written and stuck to the fridge last week when they visited. Remember to check the light in the guest bathroom. The lighting's super yellow, followed by a smiley face. Yellow light. God forbid someone look human in a photo. I sat down with my planner and started flipping through the pages, looking at every task I'd taken on for this wedding. I'd paid the deposit on the venue. I'd covered part of the flowers. I'd fronted $2,500 for the photographer, Sierra's photographer, the one she said was essential for the vibe. All that, and I wasn't even aesthetic enough to attend. They didn't just want my money. They wanted my silence. And I wasn't sure yet what I'd do about that. But I was starting to feel very, very clear. I spent that morning moving slowly through my home, like I was drifting through someone else's life. The house was clean, almost too clean. There wasn't a single smudge on the kitchen counter, not a fingerprint on the fridge handle. My planner sat open on the dining table, wedding tasks scrawled in my looping practiced handwriting. Follow up with DJ, confirm bakery invoice, send gift bags to hotel. Next to each line was a little check mark. I had checked every box. I had done everything they asked. Except, apparently, for being photogenic enough to attend. I walked to the guest room, the one I'd spent the last month redecorating so Sierra's out-of-town cousins could stay in comfort. Fresh linens, eucalyptus-scented pillow mist, a ceramic tray for jewelry. Sierra had once joked that it was like a boutique Airbnb. I remembered smiling proudly, feeling like I had done something right. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the folded blanket at the foot. It was hand-woven, Peruvian, thick, beautiful. I had bought it years ago while traveling with Ryan when he was still in college. He loved that trip. We hiked, ate too much street food, laughed at our awful Spanish. That was the last time I remembered him looking at me like I was home. Now, he looked at Sierra that way, or worse, at his phone when Sierra was in the room. I picked up my phone and opened our last few text threads. So many of them were logistics. Got the cake flavors confirmed. Can you check on the chairs? Don't forget Sierra's mom is vegan. No heart emojis. No thanks, Mom. No photos of how the tux fitting went. Just requests. And me, responding like I was hired help. I hadn't raised him to be like this. That's what kept echoing in my head. I raised him to be thoughtful, to be kind, to remember birthdays and send thank you notes. But somehow, in the whirlwind of adult life, ambition, and romantic entanglements, he had grown into someone who could look away from cruelty if it meant avoiding conflict. Or maybe I was just finally seeing him clearly. When I had called him the day before, after Sierra's message, I'd been hoping for some part of him to push back. Just one moment of defense. She didn't mean it like that, Mom. Of course you're coming. I'll talk to her. But no, what I got instead was, it's her day. As if I hadn't helped fund half of it. I stood up and went to the living room, needing movement. I paced, then paused by the fireplace where our old family photos sat in mismatched frames. There we were, Ryan, age 5, grinning in a red sweater at Christmas. Ryan, 13, holding a soccer trophy with scraped knees. Ryan at graduation, hugging me so tight I had to laugh through tears. I traced the edge of one of the frames with my fingertip. I used to be his whole world. Now I was an editing error in Sierra's wedding aesthetic. And yet, despite all of it, I couldn't stop thinking about what still needed to be done. The florist needed a final confirmation by Monday. The vendor menu hadn't been printed. There were 32 centerpieces to assemble, and Sierra had given me very specific instructions about the eucalyptus stems being asymmetrical but intentional. It hit me then, suddenly, violently. I had been turned into a bridesmaid without the dress, a planner without the paycheck, a mother without a seat at the ceremony. And I let it happen. I had swallowed every passive-aggressive comment, every sideways glance, every micro-instruction from Sierra, wrapped in faux compliments. You're so organized, Lydia. Can you just manage the whole dessert situation? Or your vibe is so calm, perfect for handling the shuttle schedule. She never asked, she assigned, and I had accepted it as the price of closeness. Because when you're a mother, especially one who's lost a partner young like I did, you tell yourself that being needed is love. You start to mistake being useful for being valued. That if you keep doing enough, fixing enough, showing up enough, You'll earn your place at the table. But love that has to be earned isn't love. It's performance. And I was tired of performing. I texted Ryan that afternoon. Short, polite, careful. I've confirmed the bakery for Thursday. The final invoice came in $52 over budget, just a heads up. Let me know if you need anything else. No smiley face. No emojis. Just a tone that said, "You've made me a task manager, so that's what I'll be." He replied a few hours later with a thumbs up. That was all. A single sterile emoji from the boy I used to sing lullabies to in the middle of the night. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked out the window. The garden was blooming. The roses I'd planted in the spring were finally opening, soft and pink and proud. There was a time, not long ago, when I imagined hosting Sunday brunches there with Sierra and Ryan, maybe grandkids playing in the yard. I saw myself flipping pancakes, cutting watermelon, passing down recipes and stories and spoiling them silly. Now I wasn't even good enough to be in the background of their wedding photos. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and took a hot bath. Not because I was celebrating anything, but because I was done punishing myself for their choices. I needed to stop asking why they didn't want me there. The better question was, why was I still helping them? That's when I made my first real decision. I didn't announce it. I didn't rage. I didn't write a dramatic email. I just decided. If they were going to treat me like the invisible labor behind their perfect day, then they would get what they asked for, invisibility. No more soft reminders, no more quiet fixes, no more free labor. I would finish the tasks I'd committed to, but I would not pretend I was part of the celebration. They had their vision, and I had mine. That night, I went through the kitchen like I was preparing for a guest who would never come. I moved methodically, almost ceremonially, washed the teacup I'd used that morning, wiped the stove twice, though it was already spotless, rearranged the spice rack, even though I wouldn't be cooking for anyone but myself. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, a dull backdrop to the thoughts circling in my head like vultures. For 31 years, my identity had been stitched into other people's needs. Breakfasts before school, brown paper lunches with heart notes, emergency school projects, last-minute Halloween costumes, tutoring through algebra when even I didn't understand the textbook anymore. And when Ryan's father passed away, I became everything: provider, protector, cheerleader, and safety net. So when did I become optional? I turned off the overhead light and let the under-cabinet glow spill across the counter like a gentle hush. The kitchen looked perfect, warm, soft, curated, and yet I felt like a ghost in it, like someone who used to matter inside these walls. The wedding notebook sat on the end of the kitchen island, thick and overly decorated with gold foil leaves and tabs labeled things like design board, seating plan, and vendor confirmations. Sierra had handed it to me 6 months ago with that rehearsed gratitude that always felt a beat off from sincerity. "You're the organized one," she'd said, smiling like it was a compliment, not a delegation. I had nodded, told her I'd be honored, because back then I still believed that helping her plan the perfect wedding meant I'd be part of it. I opened the book, now, and flipped through the pages, each filled with handwritten lists and printed screenshots, venues, menus, a schedule that broke the weekend down into 15-minute increments, every detail micromanaged, every inch of the day choreographed. And not one space for me. No mention of where I would sit. No note beside my name. No dress coordination. No mother of the groom consideration in the timeline. Not even a line item. I stared at the page for a while. Then I turned it, and turned another, and another. It was like playing Where's Waldo, except I wasn't anywhere to be found. They'd carved me out of the biggest event I'd helped build, left me in the kitchen, while the show played on, without me. I closed the book and pressed my hands on the cover, flat and firm. I had always been good at hiding my anger behind usefulness, behind helpful smiles and tidy tasks, but it was getting harder. I walked to the hallway and pulled down the old photo album from the top shelf of the linen cabinet, the blue one with the leather spine and the broken clasp that Ryan used to flip through when he was little, the one filled with sticky pages and Polaroids from birthdays, school plays, science fairs. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, the album in my lap, and turned the first page. There he was, age 4, wearing a Batman cape and holding a garden hose like it was a sword. I remembered that day he'd tried to protect a line of ants from the spray, declaring himself their hero. His heart was so big back then, so soft and earnest. I flipped through more: his 7th grade graduation, a summer road trip, the first dog we adopted, all frozen smiles and sunlit memories, all proof that we were once a team. And yet, here I was, not even guest listed. I traced his face in one of the photos. "You used to look at me like I was the safest place in the world," I whispered. "Now you act like I'm an embarrassment to be photoshopped out." The photo blurred. I blinked and realized my eyes had welled without me noticing. I wiped them quickly. I wasn't crying for them. I was crying for what I had lost quietly over the years. For every time I made myself small to make someone else feel big. For every moment I had mistaken tolerance for love. I didn't go to bed right away. Instead, I went to the study and opened my bank app. I hadn't looked at the recent charges in detail since the wedding expenses began rolling in. I was too trusting, too eager to support, but that night, I scrolled and scrolled. There were multiple transactions from the resort in Tulum, charges I didn't remember approving. Spa package, couples dinner cruise, even a private snorkeling session. Some of them were small, $98, $140, others were much higher. Then, I noticed the card number. It was my old travel credit card, the one I'd loaned Ryan temporarily the year his car broke down. He'd promised he destroyed it after. Apparently that wasn't true. My mouth went dry. I pulled out a notepad and began jotting down the charges, one by one, with dates, amounts, vendor description. By the time I reached the bottom of the list, the total was nearing $8,000. And not once had anyone said a word to me. No warning, no apology, not even a heads up. They just assumed I'd pay for their honeymoon. I sat back in the desk chair, staring at the numbers. I wasn't even invited to the wedding, but I was footing the bill for the post-wedding fantasy. My hurt burned off like morning fog. What replaced it was something colder, sharper. I reached for my phone and dialed the bank. The agent who answered was polite, professional. I gave her the card number and confirmed the transactions I did not authorize. "Yes, we can begin the fraud investigation," she said. "Would you like to cancel the card?" "Immediately," I said. Then I called the resort. The woman at the front desk was chipper. "Of course, I can help you with that booking, Miss Bennett," she said. "I'd like to rebook the honeymoon suite," I told her, "under my own name." "You'd like to rebook it?" "Yes. Solo traveler. Please include the yacht dinner and spa package, and remove Matthew Adams and Sierra from any associated bookings." There was a pause on the other end. Then, quietly, "Would you like us to notify them?" I smiled. "No, thank you," I said. "I'll handle that myself." The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. There was no sound in the house, except the wind brushing gently against the window panes. For a moment, I simply lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd imagined everything. The text, the credit card charges, Ryan's cowardice. Maybe, just maybe, I had overreacted. But then I turned to my nightstand. There it was, my handwritten list of the charges, my canceled card confirmation, and a printed itinerary from the resort, the same resort Ryan and Sierra had planned for their post-wedding bliss. Only now, it had my name on it. Miss Lydia Bennett. Solo traveler. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was clarity. If they didn't want me in their perfect little celebration, they wouldn't get me in it. And if they assumed my money came with no boundaries, they were about to learn otherwise. I rose and stretched, my joints quietly cracking in protest, and walked to the bathroom. I let the hot water run longer than usual. The steam felt like a reset, a peeling away of whatever pieces of me had tolerated being overlooked. I took my time getting ready, not for anyone else, but for myself. I wore soft gray slacks, a linen blouse, and the silver locket Ryan had given me on his 12th birthday. It had cost him 3 weeks of core money. I used to wear it all the time, then somewhere along the years, I stopped. It felt almost sacred now, like a link to who I had once been, a mother, a woman who mattered. Downstairs, I placed a handwritten note on the kitchen counter, just in case Ryan or Sierra decided to stop by. Unlikely, but I didn't put anything past them now. "Thanks for everything. I'll be out of town for a bit. Don't wait up." I made myself a simple breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast with orange marmalade, and ate it slowly. I didn't pack in a rush. No frantic checklist. No last-minute guilt. Just my favorite clothes, a pair of sandals, a travel book on Mexico, and a red leather journal I hadn't written in since my 60th birthday. The suitcase zipped closed with a sound that felt like punctuation. Not an end, but a shift. The moment you put down the pen and pick up a new one, ready to write the next chapter differently. By the time the cab arrived, I was ready. The driver, a sweet man with a baseball cap and smile lines, hoisted my bag into the trunk without comment. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. There was nothing there I needed to revisit. At the airport, I moved through check-in like someone who had done this 1,000 times. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was the weight lifting from my shoulders. When I handed over my boarding pass, the agent smiled and said, "First class. Lucky you." I smiled back, a quiet kind. I think I earned it. In the lounge, I sipped cappuccino and flipped through a travel magazine. The couple next to me was talking excitedly about their honeymoon, showing each other TikToks of resorts and beach outfits. I didn't flinch. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't compare. I simply turned the page. On the flight, I had the window seat. A soft blanket, a glass of champagne, and silence. Somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico, I pulled out the red journal and began writing. Day 1. Tulum. Not running, not hiding, just beginning. The resort was everything Sierra had gushed about. The infinity pool, the private plunge suite, the open-air reception desk, scented with lemongrass and sea salt. A young staff member in crisp white linen greeted me by name, handed me a welcome drink and carried my bag like I was royalty. I didn't correct him. For once I let someone treat me like I was worth carrying things for. My villa was tucked into the corner of the resort, where the stone path met the sand. A private pool shimmered beside a terrace, furnished with cushioned chairs and soft lanterns that would glow at night. Inside, the marble tub sat beneath a skylight. The king-sized bed was made with linens so soft I wanted to sink into them right then and there. I took off my shoes and walked barefoot across the cool floor. This wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. That evening, I put on a loose cotton dress, the color of sun-warmed clay, and sat on the edge of the infinity pool with a cocktail in hand. The ocean stretched beyond the glass edge, endless and forgiving. A breeze picked up, salty and alive. I closed my eyes. I hadn't felt this calm in years. No grocery lists, no wedding tasks, no strained smiles. Just me. Just here. At one point, I caught my reflection in the black glass of the pool water, wrinkled. Yes, but also steady, and quietly radiant in a way I hadn't seen before. I took a photo, just a simple selfie. Not posed, not forced, cocktail in hand. Ocean behind me. And I posted it. Not out of pettiness. At least, that's what I told myself. The caption was simple. Turns out Wrinkles look just fine in paradise. I put the phone away. By the time I woke up the next morning, the post had blown up. Friends had commented first, laughing emojis, heart eyes. You go, girl. Then extended family. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. Wait, aren't Ryan and Sierra supposed to be in Tulum for their honeymoon? I didn't reply, but I liked the comment. And that was enough. By the third day of my trip, the resort staff had begun to treat me like an old friend. They greeted me by name, brought me extra towels without asking, and added mint to my drinks because I'd mentioned once, just once, that I liked it that way. There's a unique kind of kindness in being seen without effort. Not because you've asked for it, not because someone needs something from you, just because you exist. It was a kindness I hadn't felt from my own son in far too long. Each morning, I took my tea out to the terrace and watched the sky blush with sunrise. The waves spoke in hushes, as if they too knew what I had endured. I journaled. I swam. I let my skin freckle under the sun. I kept my phone on silent, buried in the beach bag, unless I needed it for a photo. But the internet had its own momentum. By the afternoon of the second day, my post, turns out Wrinkles looked just fine in paradise, was no longer just a vacation snapshot. It had transformed into a quiet fire. People weren't just liking it. They were talking about it, reacting to it, sharing it. Someone I barely knew from my bridge club commented, Wasn't your son's wedding this weekend? Another said, wait, I thought you paid for their honeymoon? A niece I hadn't seen since her sweet 16 posted a clapping emoji and wrote icon. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The comment section did the talking for me. By the third night, the messages started arriving in clusters. Some from friends, others from family, a few from people I barely remembered but who apparently remembered me. And then came the calls. The first was from an unknown number. Then another, and another. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to break the silence just yet. Instead, I treated myself to the spa package I'd unknowingly paid for weeks ago. The same one Sierra had insisted was non-negotiable for the honeymoon ambiance. A deep tissue massage, a facial, and something called a seaweed detox wrap that made me feel like a rolled burrito but left my skin soft as silk. Afterward, I walked barefoot back to my villa, my robe fluttering slightly in the evening breeze. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Not because of anything especially funny, just because I could. Because I was finally remembering how I had just slipped into my linen nightgown when a soft knock came at the door. "Miss Bennett?" a voice called gently from the other side. I opened it to find the resort manager, a young woman in a blazer far too warm for this climate, standing nervously. "I'm so sorry to disturb you," she said, holding a tablet. "But there's a man and woman at the front desk asking for access to your room. They claim there's been some kind of mix-up." My heart didn't jump. My blood didn't chill. I didn't panic. I simply raised an eyebrow. "Are they registered guests?" I asked. She checked the tablet. "No, ma'am. Their names aren't on any active booking. We canceled their registration after your update last week." "Then kindly ask them to leave the premises," I said. "And if they return, notify security." She blinked, then nodded. "Of course. Would you like a complimentary bottle of wine this evening?" I smiled. "That would be lovely." When I closed the door, I didn't lean against it. I didn't sigh with relief. I just walked back to the vanity, applied moisturizer, and sat down with a fresh cup of tea, calm, composed. A woman, in full possession of her peace. But I knew it wasn't over. Ryan doesn't give up easily, not when he wants something. And even now, I suspected he still didn't realize what he'd truly lost. Sure enough, the next night, my phone rang again. This time, I picked up. "Mom?" Ryan's voice came through the line, like a snapped branch, cracked, brittle, strained. I kept my tone light. "Hi, honey. How's married life?" He didn't laugh, didn't even say hello. "How could you do this to us?" he demanded. We showed up, and the front desk told us the room was gone. "You embarrassed Sierra in front of the whole lobby." I waited until he was done yelling. Then, in the same measured tone, I said, "Did you think I wouldn't find out you used my credit card?" Silence. Then, quieter. "We thought you wouldn't notice. You used my name, my money. And then Sierra told me I wasn't good enough to attend your wedding. What exactly did you expect me to do? Bake you cookies and smile for the Instagram reel?" He tried to backpedal, to paint Sierra as under stress, as just trying to curate a certain look. I let him talk. Let the excuses pile up like damp laundry. Then I dropped the final line. "You and Sierra played a game you weren't ready for. You used me, excluded me, lied to me, and still expected me to pay for your fantasy. We were going to pay you back. Then why hide it?" He stammered. "We didn't think you'd say yes." And there it was, the truth. They didn't respect me, but they felt entitled to me. I let the silence stretch. I could hear the tension in his breathing. Then I said, "Enjoy your marriage, Ryan. I'll be enjoying the honeymoon." And I hung up. I turned off my phone, walked out onto the terrace, and sat under the stars. The sky here felt bigger, like it knew I needed room to grow. The ocean hummed softly in the background, the breeze warm against my skin. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt real, whole, grounded in a way I hadn't in years. Not as someone's mother. Not as a +1 to a day I helped pay for, just as me. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birdsong and a soft knock at the villa door. The sky was still streaked with the warm gray of dawn, and the air smelled like salt and lime. "Room service," a cheerful voice called from the other side. I opened the door and was met with a tray holding warm pastries, mango slices, and a folded note. I hadn't ordered anything. The note read, "Compliments of the manager. Word travels fast. Quiet power never goes unnoticed. I laughed. A soft, involuntary thing. I carried the tray inside, sat down on the edge of the bed, and took a bite of pineapple bread. It was still warm. It tasted like satisfaction. After breakfast, I opened my phone, mostly out of habit, and was met with chaos. My photo had made it to Twitter, or rather someone else had brought it there. A screenshot of my post, along with a caption that read, "Bride bans groom's mother from the wedding because her wrinkles ruin the aesthetic. So the mom cancels their honeymoon and takes the trip herself." 84,000 likes, thousands of retweets, hundreds of comments. Most were stunned. Others furious, some laughing so hard they could barely type. I wasn't tagged, but anyone who knew the wedding could do the math, and someone had done it. I scrolled through the thread, heart calm and curious. It had taken on a life of its own now. This woman is my spirit animal. Protect this queen at all costs. Imagine being that bride and thinking you could erase your Mel. There were memes. One of them had my photo with sunglasses edited on, and the caption, "When you fund the dream and still get uninvited, so you take the dream back." I snorted into my tea. I hadn't even shared the story. I had just existed. But apparently, that was enough to ignite something in people who'd been stepped on, overlooked, silenced. My inbox was full. Facebook messages from distant relatives, comments on old posts, suddenly revived. Even my college roommate from 40 years ago wrote, "Lydia, is this about you? Tell me it's not true. Or if it is, tell me you're okay." I was better than okay. And yet, somewhere in the back of my mind, I braced myself. Because stories that go viral don't stay contained. They spill, they bleed, they find people who weren't meant to see them, especially the ones trying hardest to hide. That evening, it happened. The resort phone rang. I answered. "Miss Bennett," the concierge said, sounding flustered. "There's a situation." I sighed. "Let me guess, a couple claiming they were supposed to be here?" "Actually," she said carefully, "we've received an email from someone claiming to represent the wedding party, asking if your name could be removed from all booking visibility." I let out a quiet, slow breath. "And how did you respond?" "I told them that only you could make changes to your reservation. And that, as the legal card holder and guest of record, your name is secure." "Good," I said. "Thank you." But I wasn't done. I checked my messages again. And there it was. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You made Sierra cry in front of strangers. You ruined everything." No name. No punctuation. Just rage. Just projection. I folded my phone closed and placed it gently on the nightstand, like it was a ticking clock. That should have been enough. A bitter message from a bride who got caught. But by then, something new had already begun. The thread, the one with my photo and the story, had reached a cousin of Sierra's. A woman named Hannah, who I had helped arrange transportation for back when she wasn't speaking to most of the family. She sent me a DM. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go viral, but you deserve better. I was there. I saw how they treated you." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then another message came in. This one from a woman named Ava. "Hi, I work with Sierra. We've never met, but I thought you should know. She's been bragging at work about how she milked the mill for the trip. She called Ryan boring, but reliable. She's still talking to a guy named Eric from the office." I stared at the screen. Ava sent screenshots, texts, a voice memo, a photo of Sierra at a bridal brunch, champagne in hand, laughing. "Once the rings are on and the trip is booked, I don't care what she thinks. Her money got us to Mexico. After that, ghost her. It's called modern boundaries." I saved everything, and I sat very still. I had spent weeks wondering if I was overreacting, if I'd made too big a deal out of one cruel message. But now I had proof, not just of exclusion, not just of theft, but of calculation, of arrogance, of someone who thought I was too old, too soft, too irrelevant to ever fight back. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because now, it wasn't just about boundaries. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about the truth. And I wasn't going to let that truth rot in my inbox. Not after everything I'd given them. Not after everything I'd learned about what happens when women like me stay quiet. I poured myself another cup of tea, opened a new folder on my laptop, and titled it Receipts. Then, I began uploading. 3 days after I returned from Mexico, I sat in my kitchen, barefoot and peaceful, flipping through the resort's printed spa menu like it was a souvenir from a life I had only just begun living. I'd brewed a cup of pineapple tea, the kind I now associated with salt air and peace, and leaned back in the same chair where I'd once felt so invisible. But the woman in that chair now, she had edges. Quiet strength. She wasn't here to fold napkins and disappear behind someone else's celebration. The sunlight hit the table, just right, and I smiled at its warmth. Then a knock rattled the front door. Not a polite knock. It was the kind of knock that came with urgency. Desperation. I knew who it was before I even looked through the glass. I opened the door slowly, deliberately. There they were. Ryan and Sierra stood on my porch like two storm clouds in designer clothing. Ryan looked gaunt, eyes bloodshot, hair messy, hands shoved in his pockets like they were the only things keeping him upright. Sierra wore oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, but I could still see the mascara streaks on her cheeks. They didn't knock again. They just stood there, like they still had a right to this threshold. "We need to talk," Ryan said, his voice gravel. Sierra tried to speak, but her voice cracked into a whisper. "You humiliated me," she hissed. "I can't even show my face at work." I didn't flinch. "Then maybe," I said softly. "You shouldn't have stolen from me." "That wasn't stealing," she snapped. "It was a misunderstanding." I tilted my head. "Then you won't mind if I press charges?" Ryan stepped forward, hands up like I was holding a weapon. "Mom, come on. You're taking this too far. You've already ruined our reputation. Can't you just let it go?" I took a deep breath. Not to calm myself, just to draw the moment out. "So, when you excluded me, that was fine. But now that the world knows about it, I'm the problem." Ryan's jaw flexed. He looked toward the floor. I reached behind the door and pulled out a thick folder, carefully assembled during my quiet nights in Tulum. I handed it to him. "Here's the total amount. Itemized. Dates, receipts, transaction IDs. I expect it returned in full." He opened it, his hands shaking slightly. 12 grand, he said, barely above a whisper. "She's bluffing," Sierra said, crossing her arms. "No," I said evenly. "I'm not. And I'm also not bluffing about the prenup. Clause 7b. Financial misconduct within 30 days of marriage grants the contributing party the right to legal restitution." Sierra's skin lost all color. You wouldn't." "It's already in motion," I replied. "You'll be served by Monday unless I receive payment within 72 hours. Ryan stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he still saw the version of me that smoothed everything over, that apologized for asking questions, that kept baking casseroles even when she wasn't thanked. "You've changed," he said bitterly. "No," I replied. "I just stopped pretending I was okay with being used." Sierra stepped forward, voice shrill. "Do you realize what this is doing to our marriage?" "You did that yourselves," I said flatly. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." They left in silence. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout after them. I just turned the deadbolt and poured myself another cup of tea. But life, as it so often does, wasn't finished twisting, because 2 hours later, I got an email. Subject line: "You should know this." It was from Ava. "I wasn't going to get involved further," she wrote, "but this part you need to see." Attached were screenshots, messages, photos, and then, at the very end, a short video file. I hesitated before clicking it. It was Sierra, at a bridal brunch, champagne in hand, surrounded by women I didn't recognize, laughing. And then she said it. "Honestly, once the rings are on and the trips are booked, I don't really care what the mother-in-law thinks. Her money got us to Mexico. After that, we ghost her." The table laughed. Sierra smirked. "It's called modern boundaries." I watched the clip 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed to let it sink into the marrow of my bones. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It wasn't stress, it wasn't miscommunication. It was who she was, who she had always been. I downloaded the video. Then I emailed it to my lawyer. Not for revenge, for court. Because now, it wasn't just about what they took from me. It was about what they thought they could get away with. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind was electric. Sharp, focused, alert. For once, it wasn't worry keeping me up. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I knew exactly what needed to be done. By morning, I had everything printed. The screenshots, the resort receipts, the fake business invoice, the prenup clause, the bridal brunch transcript. I labeled each item with sticky notes and timestamps, then clipped it all neatly into a presentation folder. My lawyer had confirmed it. Sierra and Ryan hadn't just violated my trust, they'd broken actual laws, misuse of funds, fraudulent charges, and with Sierra's business account now traced back to a fake LLC, Chloe Designs, a name she'd created and never registered, things were shifting from civil to criminal. I had the choice to press charges, and I intended to. But first, there was a matter of family. The reunion was already scheduled. Ryan's father's side. They had invited me out of pity, I think. After the viral posts, the whispers started, and some of them, maybe, had begun to question the golden couple's version of events. I RSVP'd. Yes, I didn't go to make a scene. I went to end one. The day was warm, almost too perfect, the kind of weather that fools you into thinking things are calm when a storm's about to break. The gathering was at Ryan's aunt's house, outdoor tables, banners in cursive font, homemade lemonade in mason jars. I wore the same white sundress Sierra once said was too plain for the wedding palette. It felt right. I stepped into the yard and felt the tension immediately. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A few cousins looked surprised. Others just watched in silence. At the far end of the lawn, Ryan and Sierra sat at a table, side by side, trying to act normal. Sierra's smile was brittle, her hands clenched tight in her lap. Ryan looked up and saw me, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes. Fear, guilt, maybe just exhaustion. I walked straight to the head table, where most of the extended family sat. I tapped my spoon against a glass. Ding ding. Sorry to interrupt, I said evenly. Loud enough for the whole yard. I just wanted to thank everyone for the invitation. And since most of you have heard some version of recent events, I thought it might be time to share the full truth. Murmurs rose like smoke. Sierra's smile cracked. Lydia, she said quickly, this really isn't the time. I raised a hand, calmly. You made it public the moment you excluded me from the wedding for having wrinkles. You made it public when you used my credit card, without permission. Now you don't get to decide when the curtain falls. I turned to the family and held up a folder. I have here proof of fraudulent charges, bank records, emails, screenshots of Sierra bragging about ghosting me after I funded their honeymoon. A gasp. One cousin dropped her fork. I also have a video clip, I said, pulling out a small speaker and pressing play. Sierra's voice echoed through the yard, cheerful and cruel. Her money got us to Mexico. After that, ghost her, it's called modern boundaries. Silence. Then a few audible gasps. I looked over. Sierra was shaking now. Ryan looked pale. You stole from me, I said. You humiliated me, and you assumed I would stay quiet. I opened the folder to a new page. This, I continued, is a formal criminal complaint for identity fraud and misuse of funds. And this, I flipped again, is the prenup clause your lawyer told you didn't matter. It does. I looked around at the stunned faces. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for truth, because when you let people rewrite your story for long enough, you start to forget what really happened. Sierra stood abruptly. You're sick, she snapped. You're turning our wedding into a circus. Janine, my sister, stepped between us. No, she said calmly. You did that the moment you banned Lydia from the wedding she paid for. Sierra spun to Ryan. Say something. But Ryan didn't move. He was staring at the documents, mouth tight, eyes glassy. He looked small, like a boy in a too big suit. I walked toward him and laid the final page in front of him. Restitution. $12,000, or I file first thing Monday morning. Sierra lunged toward the documents like tearing them would make them disappear, but Janine intercepted her. Don't even think about it, she said sharply. Ryan looked at me, then back at Sierra. And then he said the one thing I never expected. Maybe we are criminals. Sierra slapped his arm. You pathetic coward. I should have never married you. And there it was. Out loud, in front of everyone. Ryan didn't respond. He just stared at the ground, his face a map of regret. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply gathered the folder, turned to the crowd, and said, "That's all." Then I walked away. 5 minutes later, Sierra stormed out, heels digging into the grass, muttering about lawyers and betrayal. Ryan followed, slowly, shoulders sagging. Some people tried to go after them. Janine stopped them. "Let them go," she said. "Let them feel it." As I reached my car, a few cousins came over, some apologizing, some just staring. One uncle whispered, "Lydia, you're a damn hurricane." I smiled, faintly. That's what happens when people try to drown you and forget you can swim. The morning after the reunion, my phone rang before 7 a.m. I was in the kitchen again, same chair, same ceramic mug, but the air around me felt different now. Lighter, like a wall had been torn down. I didn't jump when I heard the ring. I didn't even check the number. I already knew. It was Sierra's mother. Her voice crackled through the line like a live wire. "Lydia," she began, without preamble, "what the hell is wrong with you?" I blinked, sipped my tea. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "You're destroying a young couple's future." "Sierra is pregnant," she said, as if it were the final card she had been saving. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. Let it echo between us. "And you're dragging them through court while she's carrying twins?" she went on, her tone now laced with carefully orchestrated righteousness. "Do you know what stress does to an unborn child?" Now that got my attention. Twins? But not from her. From a text that came in later that afternoon. 3 words. No punctuation. No apology. "We're having twins. Ryan." I stared at the message for a long time. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask to talk. He didn't acknowledge what had happened. Just the announcement. As if a pregnancy erases betrayal. As if new life replaces the rot of what they'd done. I didn't reply. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on their door and handed them the official legal complaint. I didn't have to hear it to know they were blindsided. But then came the twist. I got word that Sierra had emptied her personal bank account and vanished. Left Ryan holding the bag. She told her friends it was his mess to clean up. I found out from Ava, who sent me a screenshot of Sierra's now deleted story. A blurry photo of palm trees with the words, "Starting over, Florida bound. Don't look back." She had moved in with a friend. She was still claiming she was pregnant, still trying to build some half-baked influencer career under a new name. A new nest mama. I didn't follow. I didn't look her up. But I heard things that no one could confirm. The pregnancy. That even her closest friends didn't know if Ryan was the father. That she might not even know herself. And honestly, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. Ryan came back. Alone. He showed up on my porch with his shirt wrinkled, hair unwashed, and a look on his face that I hadn't seen since he was a teenager getting caught sneaking in past curfew. He didn't knock. He just stood there, for 10 long minutes, as if willing me to open the door. Eventually I did. He looked up. His eyes were glassy, swollen. "Mom," he said, "I messed up." I crossed my arms. "I was stupid," he said quickly. "But I didn't know about the fake account. That was Sierra. I swear. I didn't know she was still talking to that guy at her office. I didn't know she was lying about." "Stop," I said gently. He did. I looked at him, the boy I had raised, the man he had become, and for the first time in months, I saw something real: shame, not fear, not strategy, not another performance. Just shame. "I lost her," he said, voice cracking. "I lost everything. Can we just reset?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said, "You lost me the day you watched her humiliate me," and said nothing. He looked like I'd slapped him. I stepped back and said the last thing he ever expected, "And you're not going to lose everything, because I'm about to drop the lawsuit." His eyes widened. "Why?" "Because I already won." He blinked. "Everyone saw who she was, and who you became beside her. You'll live with that longer than court records ever could." And before he could respond, I closed the door. But I didn't go back to my quiet little retirement life. Not yet, because 2 days later, my lawyer called again. "Lydia," he said, his tone almost reverent, "you were right to hold on to that vendor contract." I smiled. That contract, buried in a folder Sierra had barely glanced at, listed me not just as the financier, but as the co-signer for all media production related to the wedding, photos, video, usage rights, and buried even deeper, a clause that gave me joint editorial access in the event of breach. Guess what? Banning the groom's mother from the wedding counts as. I called the photographer, the same one I paid a deposit for, the one who had already processed my refund. He sounded apologetic, hesitant, but willing. "Do you want to review the raw footage?" he asked. Absolutely. And we did. Together, we watched everything, unedited, unfiltered. The stilted vows, Sierra rolling her eyes when Ryan tried to kiss her forehead, the forced laughter, the awkward cake cutting, the speech from her friend that called Ryan the most reliable placeholder until someone better comes along. We clipped a few scenes, added no commentary, posted the video online with a caption, "Behind the curtain of a perfect wedding." It didn't need an explanation. People connected the dots on their own. By the end of the week, it had over 2 million views. I didn't say a word, not once, but the footage spoke louder than I ever could. Ryan deleted all his social accounts. Sierra tried to report the video, but had no grounds, because I had the rights, because I had the receipts, because this time the truth was public and legal. The day the final blow landed was quiet. No lightning strike, no grand confrontation, no final argument in a parking lot with slammed car doors and accusations. It was just me, sitting in my lawyer's office, sipping a cup of herbal tea while he slid the final settlement across the polished desk. $12,000 in full reimbursement, $5,000 in damages. A notarized statement relinquishing all claim to gifted wedding assets or future financial support. Ryan's signature, clear and neat at the bottom. Sierra's? Absent. She had ghosted him entirely. According to Ava, she'd packed her bags, left Florida, and moved in with a friend in Arizona. She was still pretending the miracle twin pregnancy was real, still holding on to her influencer dreams, trying to rebrand under a new name, pretending she hadn't been exposed in front of the entire internet. No one could confirm if she was actually pregnant. No ultrasound, no due date, not even a name mentioned. Just rumors and silence. Ryan had tried to add a clause at the last second. Reconciliation contingent on financial forgiveness. I refused. Not because I was bitter, because I was done. I signed my side of the agreement, shook my lawyer's hand, and stepped into the sunshine outside his office like I'd walked out of an old skin. No anger, no guilt, just lightness. 3 days later, the money hit my account. I didn't stare at the numbers in disbelief. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just closed the banking app and let out a long breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't the money itself. I didn't need it. My house was paid off. I had retirement savings. I lived simply, and my needs were few. It was what the money represented. It was proof that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't overreacted, that I wasn't the selfish one, that boundaries, once drawn, could stand, and that sometimes dignity can't be bought, but it can be defended. I used a portion of it to book a trip to Merida, on the other side of Mexico, not to escape, to celebrate, a solo week of food, culture, and quiet peace. But before I left, I had one final thread to tie. Remember the clause in the vendor contract? The one granting media rights to co-signers? It turned out, since I was listed as both co-signer and financier, and since Sierra had breached our agreement by excluding me without notice, I had legal clearance to use all wedding footage and photographs for personal, editorial, and promotional purposes. So, I called the photographer again. He didn't even hesitate this time. He'd been pulled through refund hell and left with unpaid post-processing fees. "I'm happy to cooperate," he said. We met one last time, reviewed everything, selected the moments that mattered. There was no commentary, no voiceover, just clips, the tense glances, the performative laughter, the stiff way Sierra flinched when Ryan touched her shoulder, the empty speeches, the background shots where everyone looked like they were waiting to leave. We uploaded the file to a private video host with restricted sharing permissions and quietly dropped it into a few of the comment threads that had once asked, "Do we have proof?" We titled it, "Behind the Curtain, When Aesthetics Matter More Than People," and we let it breathe. I didn't post it to my page. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't scream. I just pressed publish, then closed the tab. Within 24 hours, it had nearly 1 million views. People connected the dots. The whispers became conversations. The original post with my poolside photo was reshared again with context, now called "The Mother Who Took Back Her Power." My name was never in the title, but the truth had a shape. And it looked like me. Ryan deleted all his remaining social accounts. Sierra tried to report the video, but had no standing. It wasn't slander. It wasn't private. It was licensed documentation posted by a co-owner. And best of all, it was boring. No yelling, no scandalous audio. Just awkward, hollow joy caught on camera. People saw what I saw. That sometimes the prettiest events are the emptiest ones. That sometimes a picture-perfect life is just performance with good lighting. That sometimes the mother of the groom isn't the one who needs correcting. She's the one who kept the receipts. I didn't celebrate. I just packed. 2 days later, I landed in Merida. Warm air greeted me like an old friend. I checked into a modest but sun-drenched casita on a quiet corner, surrounded by bougainvillea and blue-painted walls. On my second day, I went to the market and bought a blue and white hand-woven hammock. On my third day, I danced in the square with a group of retired women who wore embroidered blouses and laughed like they owned the sun. On the last day, I met with a local realtor and signed a 6-month lease for a 2-bedroom casita near the plaza. I hadn't planned to move. But as I sat in that courtyard, sipping strong coffee and listening to street musicians play under the shade of mango trees, I realized something. I was free, not just from Ryan and Sierra, but from the version of myself who believed motherhood meant martyrdom, who thought love required self-erasure, who once believed aging meant invisibility. It didn't. I was still here. I had stories to tell, meals to enjoy, friendships to deepen, and a whole life to live. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's scapegoat, but as Lydia. I came back home to blooming hydrangeas, a tidy porch, and silence. The house looked just as I had left it, neatly swept, keys in the ceramic bowl, the linen drapes catching the morning light. Janine had checked in while I was gone. She'd watered the plants, restocked the fridge, and left a single daisy in a vase on my kitchen table. "House looks peaceful," her note read. "So do you." And it did. The old weight was gone. The ache of being overlooked. The burn of betrayal. I walked through each room not as a woman seeking control, but as one who had finally stopped chasing it. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I just needed them out of the way. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the kitchen window, watching the wind ripple through the trees. I wasn't waiting, I wasn't hoping, but I knew, sooner or later, there would be another knock. It came 3 days later. I was sorting through my travel photos, deciding which ones to print. I had just selected a shot of the plaza musicians when I saw the email notification pop up. From Ryan. Subject line: "I'm getting help." I stared at it for a long time. No attachment, no body text, just 3 short words. I clicked it open. Inside was a longer message. "Mom, I know I don't deserve a response, but I've started therapy. I'm going to counseling. I've been staying with a friend. I know what I did was wrong. What I let happen. What I didn't stop. I see it now. I've been reading the comments on that video. I haven't tried to defend myself. I've been listening. If there's any way back, not to what we were, but to something honest, I'll be here." I didn't reply. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the backyard. The grass felt cool under my feet. My garden was alive again. Neglected for too long. Yes, but still stubborn in its growth. That's the thing about life. It continues. Even after people try to uproot it. The next day, I got another message. Shorter this time. "I want to rebuild. I've learned." Still no apology. Still no ownership of the specific things that mattered most. It was like watching someone throw rope into the ocean, hoping it would lasso forgiveness without first learning to swim. I made tea. I sat on the porch. And I didn't respond. Because forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else's comfort. It's a room you walk into when you're ready to live without bitterness. And I was already there. I had my hammock, my travel photos, my signed lease in Merida, my peace. Then, 3 nights after that, he showed up. I heard the car before I saw it. His old Honda with the dent in the front bumper he still hadn't repaired. He didn't honk, he didn't knock right away. He just sat on the porch steps for a long time, elbows on his knees, head down like a schoolboy, waiting for detention to end. When he finally stood and rang the bell, I opened the door and stepped outside without saying a word. Ryan looked like a shadow of himself. Eyes hollow, face drawn, like whatever mask he'd worn had finally slipped for good. "I just wanted to see you," he said. "You've seen me," I replied. "I miss you," he said. "I miss the version of you that didn't disappear when I needed him most." He nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't know what to do. She made everything feel like a performance, and I was afraid of blowing it. "You didn't blow it," I said softly. "You stood there while it happened. That was the choice." He looked away. "I'm not asking for money," he said quickly. "Or anything. I just want to know if maybe not today but someday we could sit and talk." I took a long breath. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe, but not if you're still treating this like something that can be undone. You didn't hurt me once. You let it unfold, week after week. You watched her erase me. You co-signed it." "I know," he whispered. "And now you're only here because it all fell apart," I said. "Not because you stood up in the middle of it." He nodded again, but this time slower, like he'd finally started hearing himself. "I lost her," he said. "And I know that's my fault." I raised an eyebrow. "No, you didn't lose her. She left you." That landed. His mouth parted, but he didn't argue. "And maybe," I added, "that's the best thing that could have happened." He looked at me with tears building. "And you lost me," I said plainly. "The day you watched her call me not aesthetic enough and stayed silent." He winced. His eyes dropped to the steps. "And no," I continued, "you don't get to earn me back just because you're ashamed now." I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was just finished. Finished needing a son who needed reminders to love. Finished begging to be seen. Finished apologizing for not being the mother someone could exploit forever. He stood there a moment longer. Then he nodded. "I understand," he said. And this time, I believed him. He turned to go. And I let him. Because sometimes, closure isn't about slamming the door. It's about not opening it again. It's strange how quiet your world becomes after everyone who tried to control your story stops talking. There were no more texts, no more emails, no new excuses from Ryan, no sudden reappearance from Sierra. The drama, once loud and all-consuming, had gone flat, burned out. The oxygen had finally run out of their fire. And in the silence I found something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, but something steadier. I wasn't watching my back anymore. I wasn't wondering when the next insult would come disguised as a favor. I wasn't staying up at night rehearsing all the things I wished I'd said. I had said them. I had lived them. And I had documented every single one. But even that wasn't the final chapter. Not quite. Because there was still one last move left on the board, one they never saw coming. It began with a phone call from my lawyer, not the usual check-in, not another document to sign. "Lydia," he said, "you were right to hold on to that vendor media clause, but we found something else buried in the contract, something bigger." He paused. "There's a clause about public distribution rights. It grants co-financers the option to use any footage, photo, or event materials for editorial or promotional purposes, provided one party has defaulted on agreements, and Sierra defaulted the day she removed you without consent." I sat there in my study, the weight of those words filling the air around me like thunder just before a summer rain. "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means you can publish," she said simply. "All of it." I stared out the window. "Do I need to?" I asked quietly. "I already won." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Maybe this isn't about winning anymore." And he was right. It wasn't. It was about witnessing, because the world keeps going, and there are other mothers, other women, other people who are told they're too much, or not enough, or too wrinkled for a curated life. Someone else wants to sell. I didn't need an audience, but maybe someone else needed to see what survival looks like. So I did it. I compiled everything, the screenshots, the receipts, the photos from the florist Sierra claimed she chose, the emails Sierra wrote to vendors pretending to be me, the bank transfers, the edited wedding clip, the brunch recording. And I wrote an essay. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. Clear, sharp, clean. I called it. What they forgot is I paid for everything. I didn't name them. I didn't shame them. But I told the story, my story, without apology. I submitted it anonymously to a women's magazine. They published it 3 days later. It took off overnight. Tens of thousands of shares. DMs from strangers, emails from mothers, daughters, even wedding planners who had seen too much and stayed too quiet. The comments were flooded with women saying, "I felt this, in my bones. My daughter married a Sierra. I wish I'd done what you did. I'm done being the silent helper." One woman simply wrote, "I showed this to my son. I told him, don't ever let this be me." And just like that, my pain became something bigger than me. Not a weapon, a mirror. And that was all I ever wanted. To be seen, fully, finally, without needing to justify my boundaries or wrap my hurt in politeness. When I closed my laptop that night, I didn't cry. I just stood in my hallway, looking at the small wooden plaque that still hung by the front door, the one I'd carved with Ryan when he was 7. She wasn't just a mother, she was the whole house. I didn't take it down. I didn't need to. Because it wasn't a memorial anymore. It was a reminder of what I still was. Only now, the house was mine. The next morning, I walked into my sunlit kitchen, brewed tea, and hung a small photo of Meridia on the refrigerator. I had scheduled my move for October, 6 months in Mexico. My casita, my hammock, my future. I would split my time between here and there, 2 lives, both mine. And I wouldn't be waiting for anyone to catch up. Later that day, I stood in line at the post office, mailing a small envelope addressed to a nonprofit in Chicago that supports women rebuilding after financial abuse. I included a donation and a note in honor of every woman who funded someone else's dream and was erased from the photo. That evening, as the sun set behind the sycamore tree, I sat on the porch with Janine. She handed me a glass of wine and said, "So, are you finally done?" I swirled the glass, watched the gold catch the light. "Not done," I said. "Just whole." I boarded the plane to Merida with a single suitcase, a tote bag, and a carry-on filled with books I had always meant to read but never made time for. No drama, no crowds waving goodbye. Just a quiet nod from the flight attendant and the soft thud of the overhead bin closing. My seat was by the window. I leaned against it as the clouds peeled away from the ground, watching the familiar city shrink until it became unrecognizable. It felt right, leaving without announcement. After everything I'd endured, I wasn't looking for applause. I was looking for peace. And I had learned something along the way. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in calm. Sometimes it comes in clarity. Sometimes it arrives only after the noise has cleared, and your voice is the only one left in the room, and you finally realize that's enough. When I touched down in Merida, the air kissed my skin with warmth that wasn't just tropical, it was forgiving. It didn't ask me who I'd been. It didn't care about the scandal. It welcomed me anyway. My casita was smaller than my old house, but somehow it felt larger. Painted clay walls, a tiled kitchen that looked out to a small courtyard, and of course the hammock I had shipped ahead of time. I hung it under the archway between the bedroom and garden, where the breeze moved just enough to make it sway like a cradle. I didn't unpack everything the first night. I didn't need to, because this wasn't a chapter I was rushing into. It was one I was writing slowly, intentionally, by hand. The mornings were my favorite. I'd brew strong coffee and sit on the tiled steps with my journal, writing observations instead of plans. The smell of street food would drift through the neighborhood. I'd listen to conversations in Spanish from behind neighboring fences, some arguments, some laughter, all of it real, all of it honest. In the afternoons, I'd walk to the market, picking fresh tamarind and pan dulce from the same vendor who called me La Dama Valiente, the brave lady. Sometimes I'd smile and correct him. "No, senor, just a woman who got tired of being quiet." One day, I met a local librarian named Camila, a retired school teacher who hosted community book circles in the park. She invited me one afternoon. We sat under a jacaranda tree, discussing translated poetry, passing mango slices, and sipping chilled hibiscus tea from glass jars. For the first time in years, I wasn't being asked what I did for my son or what I had sacrificed for my family. I was asked, "What do you love to read?" Just that. And I had to pause, because it had been so long since anyone had asked me a question that wasn't about how I could serve someone else. I went home that night and pulled out a tattered copy of a novel I'd bought at a garage sale a decade ago and never opened. I read it until the candles burned low and my eyes blurred. There was no urgency, no to-do list, no one to impress, just sentences and breath and time. Weeks passed like that. I wrote letters to Janine back home, long ones with pressed flowers tucked inside. I emailed the nonprofit I donated to and offered to host an online workshop for women navigating late-life financial betrayal. They said yes. And one morning, as I was organizing my closet, I found an old dress folded in the bottom of my suitcase, the same one Sierra had once called a bit too old lady for the photos. I held it up. It was floral, soft, modest, A-line. It was beautiful. I wore it to the plaza that night. Not to prove anything, but because I liked how it felt when I spun in it. Yes, spun like a child while a trio played guitar under the lanterns and old couples danced in the square like no one was watching. And maybe no one was. Or maybe they were. But I didn't care either way. I danced. Badly. Joyfully. Alone. But not lonely. A few days later, I posted a photo from my balcony. The sun was setting. My hair was wind-touzled and my skin was bare of makeup. In the caption, I wrote, "Wrinkles don't ruin anything, but entitlement ruins everything. I'm not coming back." And I didn't. Not in the way they expected, because the version of me they remembered, the one who folded herself into thankless errands and invisible effort, that woman was gone. And the one who remained. She had boundaries. She had joy. She had space. A few months later, Ryan emailed again. Just a simple update. "I'm still in therapy. I'm volunteering at a senior center. I think about you every day." I didn't respond, because I didn't need to anymore. I was no longer waiting to be seen, heard, validated. The need for that had burned away in the fires they set. What remained was something quieter, stronger, permanent. Me. And one day, when I'm ready, maybe I'll write it all down. Not as a warning, but as a survival guide. Because women like me, we don't get enough stories. And when we do, they're usually written by people who think we've already disappeared. But I didn't disappear. I'm still here, still standing, still swinging in my hammock, watching the world bloom around me. And if you're reading this, if you're someone who's ever felt erased, silenced, small, here's what I hope you remember. You don't need their permission to take your life back. You don't need a perfect exit. You just need a single moment of courage to begin. Because the ending is always yours to write.